She swept the floors he paced each day. She tidied the desk where he signed the world's decisions. Invisible to everyone, until one night she left a short note on his desk, and the life he had built with silence began to crack. He read 3 words and froze, because sometimes the person you never notice is the one who sees you most clearly. If this story moves you, please like the video and subscribe to Between Raindrops Stories. Here we tell quiet stories about messy hearts, second chances, and people who show up when it matters most. The 33rd floor shut down like a stage after the last act ended. Desks emptied of laptops. The hum of fluorescent lights softened to a patient whisper, and the city below blinked its tired neon. By day, Coleman Industries was a machine of power. Executives in tailored suits, strategic meetings, the soft click of a billion-dollar decision. By night, it belonged to one woman with a mop and a playlist. Elena Cruz moved through the hallways like a steady heartbeat. She'd learned the building's rhythm, the squeak of her cartwheels on marble, the echo of her footsteps in the atrium, the way the night security lit the stairwell with a single amber bulb. Her uniform smelled of lemon disinfectant. Her pockets were small and nearly always empty. She worked these hours to keep her brother in school and to remember a promise she'd made to her father. Keep going, no matter how heavy the world gets. Elena's life was made of small certainties. She knew which light switches clicked on which segment of the corridor. She knew Mr. Hanley on 29 loved chamomile tea and forgot to cap his pen. She knew to avoid the CFO's office on Thursdays because he left work early and didn't like being disturbed. And she knew, intimately, almost as if it were a private script, the layout of the CEO's domain on the top floor. Nathan Cole, CEO. His nameplate on the frosted glass always looked like the climax of a story she'd never be in. She had seen him twice in 2 years, once in the elevator, hurrying past her without a glance, once at a charity gala on television, smiling with perfect teeth. People left him empty coffee cups and dinners of power. The office he left behind at night read like a biography in objects. A framed photo of an older man on the shelf, 2 identical leather-bound notebooks, a mug with a half-faded logo. That night, Elena worked slower than usual. Maybe she had heard a song on the radio that tugged at something soft inside her. Or maybe the winter rain had made the city feel quieter, kinder. She collected the trash, wiped fingerprints from glass, refilled the sanitizers. When she reached Nathan's office, the room smelled like stale espresso and old paper. A side lamp cast a small amber pool across his desk. She paused. Not to intrude, but because she had learned to notice things other people ignored. A crumpled scrap of paper peeked out from under the wastebasket liner. She didn't mean to look, but curiosity was a small human weakness. She smoothed the scrap on the desk and read one sentence. Not a memo, not a list, but a line that carried a hollow in it. Maybe none of it means anything anymore. The words landed in her chest like cold rain. For a man who had everything, they sounded like the most honest confession she'd ever seen. Elena felt something in her chest tug, a protectiveness she didn't expect toward a man whose life was painted in headlines and glass towers. She had never left notes before. Who would see them? Who would care? But on that office desk, between a fountain pen and a stack of unfinished reports, she found a small sticky notepad and a pen with a cap that never stayed on. Her hand moved almost on its own. She wrote one sentence, simple and awkward and full of hope. Everything means something to someone. Please don't forget that. She tucked the sticky note beneath his uncapped pen, small, almost absurdly brave, and turned off the lamp. The building sighed. She pushed her cart down the corridor and out into the mist, expecting nothing. When she returned the next night, the light was already on in Nathan's office. The sticky note was gone. Elena felt a flicker, a tiny, hopeful electricity, and kept working. She cleaned his bookshelves, replaced the sugar jars, aligned the coasters. Then she saw it. A single slip of paper, his handwriting, neat and cautious, placed where hers had been. "Who are you?" Her name felt too large for the space between her ribs. For the first time in years, someone powerful had asked her about herself. She hovered, heart hollow and loud at once. She could have left. She could have run. Instead, she found the courage to reply. On the bottom of the same slip, she wrote, careful and steady, "Someone who notices when you forget to take care of yourself." She left the room the way she always did, silent, hands steady, shoes whispering. The rest of the night blurred in the rhythm of trash bags and polished glass. But somewhere between the copier and the vending machine, she walked lighter. The next morning, Nathan Cole arrived earlier than usual. He poured a coffee and sat at his desk in the lamplight, rereading her words until the edges of the paper softened in his hands. He was a man who trusted measurements and margins, but this sentence, this human punctuation, pulled something like warmth up through the cold suit he'd worn every day. He didn't know who wrote it. He didn't know why it mattered. But he found himself waiting that evening, not for a board result or a market trend, but to see if she would write again. That night she did. He waited, watching the small lamplight, the city breathing slow. When Elena's second note appeared, he read it, then wrote something tender and clumsy in return. Their exchange began as a secret. Two people, worlds apart, trading small truths in the lamplight of a high-rise. At first it was playful, a sticky note about a left shoe that never matched its pair, a scribbled reminder to cap his pen. But small notes grew into sentences, sentences into open questions, and open questions unearthed the shape of two private lives. Nathan confessed a line he'd never told anyone, that sometimes his company's success felt emptier than the applause that came with it. Elena wrote of small, ordinary fatigue, the kind that kept her waking before dawn to make breakfast for her brother. Neither expected the other to listen. Both found comfort when they did. Weeks passed. The notes became a ritual. She cleaned, he waited for the paper to appear. He started to linger after meetings, leaving a lamp on or a half-empty mug in a certain place so she'd know he'd been there. She began to notice things about him beyond his title. The way he rubbed his forehead when thinking, the stub of a pen he chewed absent-mindedly, the photo of a man she thought might be his father. He discovered in her handwriting a calm he hadn't felt since his mother's funeral. But secrecy carries its own danger. Elena never revealed her name. She wanted the exchange to stay small, honest, and unpressured, not another transaction. Nathan, on his side, had never been asked about the person who cleaned his life. It disarmed him in ways a boardroom never could. He asked fewer executives to late-night meetings. He signed fewer worthless deals. He found himself altering minor aspects of his routine so he could be there to read her notes, to be present for the quiet conversation unfolding on cheap paper. One night, as snow began to dust the city's cornices, Elena found a different kind of note. Not a reply, but a question that felt like an invitation. "Would you ever have coffee with me? Not here, somewhere warmer. No titles, just talk." It should have scared her. It should have run. But she'd grown used to the lamplight honesty, and a strange bravery rose in her chest. She wrote back, yes, but not her name. Yes, she wrote, but only if you bring 2 sugar packets, one for the coffee, one for the courage. And for the first time, the night felt like a turning point. 2 people who'd moved in parallel for years, one noticed, one noticing, had begun a conversation that might, quietly and unexpectedly, change both their lives.
The snow had stopped by morning, but the world still wore its hush. Downtown, the cafe below Coleman Tower glowed against the gray. Soft light, warm air, the smell of cinnamon and rain-damp coats. Elena sat in the corner by the window, her cleaning uniform hidden beneath an oversized cardigan. She'd come early, too early, the way she always did when she was nervous. The second sugar packet sat in her hand, a promise, a secret, a test of courage. She kept glancing at the door, unsure if he'd come. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe she'd misunderstood. She was the night cleaner. He was the man whose name lit up half the skyline. What would they even talk about? At exactly 9:10, the door opened. Nathan Cole stepped inside, wearing no tie, no suit jacket, just a gray coat and a careful expression. He looked around, and for the first time in his life, looked down instead of ahead. When his eyes met hers, something in him stilled. He didn't ask who she was. He just smiled, a quiet, grateful sort of smile, and walked over. 2 sugar packets, he said softly, setting them on the table. Her breath caught, half laughter, half disbelief. I didn't think you'd actually come, she admitted. I wasn't sure you'd mean it, he replied. They both laughed, softly. The sound felt safe. They ordered coffee. She stirred hers too long. He didn't touch his. For a while, silence did the talking. Then Nathan said, I thought I knew this building, every inch of it. But now I realize I never noticed the person who keeps it alive. Elena smiled faintly. You notice what matters to you. People like me, we're supposed to blend in. He shook his head. You shouldn't have to. That silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was full, like the pause before truth. He leaned back, studying her. You wrote that everything means something to someone. Do you really believe that? Elena looked out the window. There's a woman who works in payroll. Every night she leaves her coffee mug half full. Most people think she forgets. I empty it carefully, because once she told me her husband used to make her tea before work, and she keeps that cup half full like he's still here. So yes, everything means something to someone. Nathan blinked, taken aback by how gently she said it. You see things differently, he murmured. No, I just look longer. Outside, the city kept rushing, people chasing hours, screens lighting up. Inside, time slowed to a pulse. For the first time, Nathan didn't feel like a CEO, just a man who'd forgotten what connection felt like. And for the first time, Elena didn't feel invisible. She caught him watching her hands. They're rough, she said quickly, embarrassed. Too much bleach. They're real, he said quietly. Most things in my world aren't. She looked at him, really looked, and saw exhaustion under control, loneliness under charm. He noticed her eyes, tired but alive, and for a fleeting moment, both forgot who they were supposed to be. Their coffee grew cold. They didn't notice. They talked about books, cities they'd never visited, and the smell of rain on concrete. When she spoke of her father, a janitor too, who died cleaning an office much like his, Nathan's throat tightened. He used to say, floors tell stories, she said softly, that you can tell the kind of person someone is by the footprints they leave behind. Nathan smiled sadly. Then mine must say, I've been running. Maybe, she said, or maybe they just say you stopped looking down. That line made him laugh, quietly, honestly, the first laugh that didn't feel like PR rehearsal in years.
When she finally stood to leave, the cafe felt smaller, warmer. He said, "You don't have to keep cleaning my office." She smiled. "And miss our nightly conversations? Never." "I mean it," he insisted. "I could find you a different position, something better." She met his eyes. "Better isn't always higher, Nathan. Sometimes it's just being seen." He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. For the first time, he didn't have an answer, just respect. She picked up her bag, dropped both sugar packets into his palm, and said, "One for courage. You'll need it more than I do." That night, Nathan sat in his office again. No notes this time. No sound except the rain. He looked around at the life he'd built, the glass walls, the titles, the awards, and he realized he'd been living in a building full of people he'd never really seen. He turned off his computer, reached for a pen, and wrote a note on the back of one of her sticky pads. "Thank you for reminding me I'm still human." He placed it on his desk, unsure if she'd see it, but somehow knowing she would. Because now he believed what she had written. Everything means something to someone. The days that followed felt different, lighter somehow, as if the air itself had learned how to breathe again. Nathan found himself noticing things he had never cared about before. The way the morning light hit the marble floors, the smell of fresh coffee in the hall, the laughter of the reception staff downstairs. The world hadn't changed. He had. And every night, without fail, a new note appeared on his desk. Sometimes they were short. "Don't forget to eat. The rain sounds softer when you listen, not just hear." Sometimes they were simple sketches, a coffee mug, a city skyline, a small heart drawn in blue ink. They became the quiet highlight of his day, a secret exchange with a stranger who had somehow seen through his armor. But secrets, no matter how innocent, have a way of echoing. It started with a whisper in the corridor. His assistant, Rachel, walked into his office one afternoon, holding a manila folder. "There's been talk," she said carefully, "about someone from the cleaning staff, a woman. Security mentioned she's been staying later than usual on the top floor." Nathan looked up slowly, pulse tightening. "And?" She hesitated. "You've been different lately. Happier. People notice things." He leaned back, forcing a neutral tone. "Let them notice. I like the quiet." She gave a polite smile, the kind that said she'd said too much, and left. But the moment the door closed, Nathan felt a pang of guilt. For years he'd hidden behind glass and policies. He'd been careful, professional, predictable. Now he was a man waiting for a note from someone who scrubbed the floors he walked on. That night he stayed late again, this time not for meetings, but to see her. At 10:47 p.m., he heard the faint squeak of a cart in the hall, the rhythm he'd grown to recognize. Elena entered quietly, earbuds in, humming softly. She didn't notice him standing in the corner until he said, "You hum when you're happy." She jumped, hand to her chest. "You scared me." "I'm sorry," raised both hands apologetically. "I thought maybe we could talk instead of writing tonight." She smiled nervously. "You know you could have just left a note, right? I wanted to see the person behind the handwriting." She rolled her eyes. "That's dangerous. You might be disappointed." "I doubt that," he said softly. They talked for minutes that turned to hours. About small things first. Her brother's exam, his mother's favorite tea, the loneliness that comes with leadership, and the exhaustion that comes from surviving.
It wasn't flirtation, not yet, but there was something tender about how their sentences curved toward understanding. When she laughed, he realized he hadn't heard laughter in his office in years. When she spoke of her late father, he found himself telling her about his, a man who'd worked his way up from nothing, only to die before seeing what his son became. "My father built everything with his hands," Nathan said quietly. "I built everything with my mind, but somehow I think he'd like your kind of work better." "Why?" "Because you clean what others leave behind. That's honest work. Mine is just numbers on glass." Her eyes softened. "Maybe it's time you start cleaning too." He chuckled. "What do you mean?" "Not desks. Your life." For a moment, the silence between them said everything words couldn't. It wasn't flirtation. Not yet. It was two broken halves recognizing each other in the dark. Before she left, she placed a folded piece of paper on his desk, not her usual sticky note. He waited until she was gone to open it. Inside, her handwriting curved gently across the page. "You remind me of my father. He worked nights too. Said some people chase light, others guard it. Maybe you never were lost. Maybe you were just standing too close to your own storm." He sat there for a long time, reading the words again and again until the ink blurred. The next morning, he came to work with something new on his desk, a single envelope, white, unmarked. No note this time, just a security memo. "Attention, cleaning staff rotation effective immediately. Due to restructuring, shifts have been reassigned. Any inquiries should be directed to facilities management." Nathan's blood ran cold. He stormed into the facilities office. "Where's Elena Cruz?" The supervisor looked up, surprised. "Transferred to night detail at Midtown branch, sir. Company policy. Rotation." He exhaled sharply. "Who authorized it?" "HR." Rachel. He turned and left without a word. That night the top floor felt wrong, too clean, too quiet. Her scent of lavender polish was gone, replaced by cold lemon. The desk gleamed, empty. No note, no message. He sat alone in the glow of the city lights, staring at the empty space where her words used to live. For the first time in his years, he didn't know what to do. So he did the only thing that felt right. He took out his phone, opened the internal directory, and searched her name. Cruz, Elena M. Location, Midtown branch, night detail. He stared at it for a moment, then grabbed his coat. Outside, the streets were wet with new rain. He drove through the city in silence, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against regret. When he arrived at the Midtown building, the security guard blinked at him in disbelief. "Mr. Cole, it's almost midnight." "I know," he said. "I'm here to return something." The guard hesitated, then nodded him through. Upstairs, in a half-lit corridor that smelled faintly of pine cleaner, he found her, kneeling by the vending machine, fixing a jammed coil. She turned, startled, ears wide. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" I held up one of her notes, folded neatly. "You forgot this." She frowned. "That's not mine." "You kept it." "I did, because I needed to remember what being human feels like." Her eyes softened. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," he said gently. "You belong back where your words matter." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence. Then he said, "They moved you because of me, didn't they?" She looked away. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She smiled sadly. "You're a CEO, Nathan. You can fix companies, but not people. Some things aren't yours to control." He took a step closer. "Then let me at least try to make this right." She sighed. "You can't unsee me now, and that's dangerous." For who? For both of us. That night Nathan left without another word, but before he went, she slipped a small folded paper into his hand. When he got home, he opened it under the soft glow of his desk lamp. It read, "Don't come looking for me. If this was meant to mean something, it already did." He sat there until dawn, the note trembling in his hand, the rain returning outside, and for the first time in his life, the sound of silence hurt.
The next morning, the sky over the city looked like crumpled steel. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, and by the time Nathan stepped into his car, rain was already falling. Heavy, insistent, like the universe had something to say. He didn't go to the office. For the first time in a decade, he didn't care about meetings, markets, or reputation. He only knew that something about Elena's note didn't feel final. People don't just disappear after changing someone's entire life. Her words echoed in his mind. If this was meant to mean something, it already did. But no, it hadn't ended there. Not for him. At Coleman Industries, whispers had grown louder. Rachel met him at the elevator, tablet in hand, face tight with unease. "Sir, the board's asking questions. You missed the investor call. There's also a situation." He paused. "What kind of situation?" She hesitated. "Someone leaked that you've been in contact with a staff member from maintenance. It's spreading online." His pulse sharpened. Who leaked it? No one knows yet, but HR's already suspended her pending investigation. They're calling it unprofessional conduct. He stared at her, speechless. Unprofessional conduct, for leaving kind words on a desk, for being human. "She's not even here anymore," he said finally, his voice cold. "They'll still make it a story," Rachel said softly. "You know how these things work." He exhaled slowly, the weight settling in his chest. "Then we'll make them hear the truth." By noon, an internal memo was already circulating, an investigation, confidentiality clauses, and his own name mentioned in whispers he couldn't control. He stood at his office window, watching the rain streak the glass. The same glass that had separated him from the world for years was now his cage. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Cole, the board's calling an emergency meeting." He didn't answer. He picked up one of Elena's notes from his drawer, the one that said, "You remind me of my father." He read it once, twice, then grabbed his coat. If the board wanted a meeting, they could wait. He had somewhere more important to be. Midtown looked different under the storm, darker, lonelier. He found her building, a low-rise complex near the river, the kind of place where the elevator hummed but never fully trusted itself to move. Apartment 4B. The door was slightly ajar. He knocked gently. "Elena?" No answer. He pushed the door open. Inside was quiet. Too quiet. A half-packed suitcase sat open on the couch, clothes folded neatly inside. The walls were bare, except for one framed photo, a young boy in a school uniform, holding a medal and smiling proudly. Her brother. On the table, beneath a coffee mug, lay a letter with his name written across it. His hands trembled as he opened it. "Nathan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not because I'm running from you, but because I can't let what we shared become something ugly in other people's mouths. You've worked your whole life to build something unbreakable. Don't let me be the reason they tear it down. Please believe me when I say this was never about the notes. It was about reminding you that you're still capable of kindness, of feeling,
of seeing people. If that's all I leave behind, it's enough. Tell them whatever story they need to hear. Just don't forget ours. Elena. He sat down heavily on her couch, the letter trembling in his hands. Outside, thunder cracked the sky open. He didn't realize he was crying until one of his tears smudged the ink. It wasn't supposed to end this way, with a letter and a storm. The next morning, the media storm broke. Headlines flashed across screens. CEO under investigation for inappropriate contact with janitorial staff. Whispers of workplace scandal at Coleman Industries. Reporters camped outside the building. Investors panicked. The board called for a statement immediately. Nathan walked into the conference room, soaked from the rain, letters still folded in his pocket. The boardroom fell silent. Nathan, one of them began carefully. We need to contain this. Issue a denial, a clarification, say it was a misunderstanding. He looked around the table, at faces that had once respected him, now watching with suspicion. He straightened his shoulders. No, he said simply. No, the chairman repeated, blinking. I'm not denying anything, because there's nothing to deny. He paused, letting the room breathe his words. She wasn't a scandal. She was a person who reminded me what it means to care. And if that makes me guilty of something, then I'm guilty of finally being human. The room went silent. That night, the story changed. Some called him foolish. Others called it brave. But the truth spread quietly, in corners of the internet where stories like hers rarely survived. The CEO who defended a cleaner. The man who refused to bury kindness under policy. 3 weeks later, she called. He was sitting in his car outside the office when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? It's me, her voice came softly. Elena. His breath caught. Where are you? Somewhere quieter. I saw the news. You shouldn't have done that. I had to. I wasn't going to let you erase you. You didn't need to save me. I wasn't trying to, I said gently. I was trying to save myself. There was silence. Not empty, but full. I missed the notes, he said finally. Then write one to yourself, and remember what I told you. Everything means something to someone. The line went quiet. She'd hung up. Nathan sat there, the phone still in his hand, the city lights reflecting off the wet windshield. He didn't move for a long time. Then slowly he took out a notepad from his glove box, the same kind she used. He wrote one line, in her handwriting's memory. Some people clean rooms, others clean hearts. He tore it off, folded it carefully, and placed it in his jacket pocket. Not to send, just to keep.
Spring came softly that year, as if the world itself was trying to apologize for all the rain. The city had healed from its headlines. Coleman Industries had found its balance again, leaner, quieter, more human somehow. But Nathan Cole, the man who once measured life in profits and quarterly reports, wasn't the same. He had stepped down as CEO 3 months after the storm. The board had called it a necessary transition. He'd called it something simpler. Peace. He bought a small workspace downtown, nothing like his old glass tower, just a renovated corner building with sunlight that poured through dusty windows and the smell of coffee that clung to the air. He'd named it the Lantern Project, a mentorship program that helped janitorial and maintenance staff across the city pursue education, health benefits, and opportunities they'd never been offered before. Because of her. Because of the notes. Every morning he arrived early. He made his own coffee now.
He turned on the lamps one by one, and sometimes, when the light hit the glass just right, he imagined he could still see her handwriting, looping gently across yellow paper. Everything means something to someone. Those words had changed him more than any boardroom could. One Friday afternoon, he stayed late, lost in paperwork. The building was quiet, except for the occasional sound of rain starting again outside. Old habits die hard. At 10:15 p.m., he looked up and froze. There, at the end of the hall, was a familiar shape, a cleaning cart, and behind it, her, Elena. Same soft eyes, same quiet grace, but different now. She wasn't in uniform anymore. She wore jeans, a simple white shirt, and a laminated badge that read, Program Coordinator, The Lantern Project. For a second, neither spoke. Nathan stood slowly. She finished for him. Working here. Your HR director found my application last month. I didn't expect you'd still be here this late. He smiled faintly. Old habits. I figured, she said. The rain outside softened, the way it always did when something good was about to happen. They walked into his office together. He offered her a seat. She declined, choosing instead to stand by the window, just like before. So, she said softly, you really did it. The program? The change. He shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You left me no choice. Someone had to make sure people like you don't stay invisible. She looked down, smiling shyly. You didn't have to go that far. I didn't do it for you, he said gently. I did it because you were right. I'd spent years building walls, and you reminded me what it means to leave a light on. She blinked quickly, fighting the warmth rising in her eyes. You kept my notes, she said quietly. All of them, he admitted. Even the one that said my handwriting looked like a doctor's prescription. She laughed, covering her mouth. I thought you'd throw that one out. I did. Twice, he smiled. It kept finding its way back. For a moment, the silence between them was full, not awkward, but tender. Rainlight flickered against the window. She stepped closer. Why did you really come to see me that night? He met her gaze. Because you were the first person who ever saw me without asking for something in return. Her voice softened. And what do you see now? He hesitated, then said quietly, a woman who left the world cleaner than she found it. Elena smiled, eyes glistening. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Then maybe you deserve this, she said. He frowned, curious, as she placed it on his desk. When he opened it, he found one of her old sticky notes, the very last one he'd ever found on his desk before she was transferred. But something was different. Below her familiar handwriting, new words had been added, neater, calmer, in his own. Hers. Everything means something to someone. His. Especially you. She smiled. I found it in your old office. Thought maybe you'd want it back. He folded it carefully, setting it beside his coffee cup. I think it's better if it stays here, where it started. They stood side by side at the window, watching the rain taper off into silence. The city lights shimmered below, reflections rippling like memories. Elena spoke first. "You know, my dad used to say that people who work at night see the world differently. We see what others leave behind, not just the mess, but the stories." "And what do you see now?" he asked. She turned to him and said, "A story that finally found its ending." He smiled, not the polished boardroom smile, the real one, the one she'd given back to him. Before leaving, she scribbled one last note and stuck it on his desk. He waited until she was gone to read it. He looked out at the city again, her words glowing in his mind like the skyline below. And somewhere between the sound of the rain and the hum of the lights, he whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, when he walked into his office, the note was gone, but on his desk sat something new. A steaming cup of coffee, 2 sugar packets beside it, and a folded napkin with a small heart drawn in blue ink. Some people walk into your life to remind you what you've lost. Others stay long enough to show you how to find it again. Because kindness doesn't just change people. It rewrites the story they tell about themselves. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Between Raindrops Stories. And tell us in the comments, would you leave a note if you knew it could change someone's life? Until next time, remember, some lights never go out.